guys ready? Our last and final speaker is Jason Kraft, aka Walter Basho. Basho? Basho. Jason grew up in Kentucky but moved to Austin to attend grad school in English at the University of Texas. He initially studied experimental queer writers of the West Coast New Narrative movement, but ended up writing a dissertation about comic books and video games, as you do, which I would like to read. He works as a software engineer and lives in South Austin with his husband, Mike. Old Green World is his first novel, and we're very proud of him. Please welcome Jason Kraft.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Good.
I want to start off by thanking Malvern Books. This is amazing. It's a wonderful store and a wonderful kindness that they've opened this place up for us and given us their hospitality. I promised myself a couple years ago, I gave myself a challenge, that every time I went to an independent bookstore, I would not leave without buying something. So I would urge you all to also make that pledge today. There are some great books here you can read. There's a book called Old Green World that you can check out. There are also a couple of books. There's Keith Ridgway is over here. Keith Ridgway is a gay Irish writer. He does this kind of experimental crime fiction. He's incredible. He wrote a book called Hawthorne and Child and another one called Never Love a Gambler. He's amazing. He blows me away. And he's here. I read that while I was writing Old Green World. Another writer that I read while writing Old Green World was Renee Gladman. Renee Gladman writes a trilogy about a mysterious country called Radica. The first one is called Event Factory. It experiments with kind of like consciousness, with culture. It has to do with kind of being a stranger in a strange land. It's beautiful. So I would also recommend those. Of course, there are lots of things. So buy some. I want to thank George and Paige for being here. Thank you so much. And thank you for inspiring me. Real quick bookkeeping note. I went to a conference. This is a little strange. I went to a conference a couple weeks ago and I talked to some people who are agents, and they were kind of interested in the book. I self-published this book, but what that kind of means is that I have to unself-publish it for a little while because publishers aren't really interested in a book that's already published. So this is you kind of now have the Basho limited edition here. So I do want to let everyone know that if you're on the fence about buying it, this is probably a good time to do it because it'll be harder to get to later. But of course, anyone who wants to read it, just send me an email later. I don't want to turn down readers, but I am going to try this traditional publishing route for a little bit and see how it goes. When I was a kid, we went to Gateway Grocery Store in Richmond, Kentucky. My mom, that was where we went. It was a local grocery store when those still existed. And my little brother Adam and I would sit actually inside the magazine shelves. Like you could, as a small child, you can sit inside the shelves. We did, and we would grab comic books from the spinner rack and just read them. And we were not allowed pets, we were not allowed toys, we were allowed one comic book per trip. And so my mom encouraged literacy and bad habit that I continue to have this day that got me a dissertation. What was great about that is that this was before comic book stores. You couldn't really follow a serial that way. You just grab whatever was there. And so you grab a Justice League, and it was part 3 of a 4-part series, and you're like, I don't know what's going on, they're on some planet, I don't know what's up, but it was incredibly pleasurable to have to construct the context around those comics. And I feel like that a lot of my life is the pleasure of constructing context around fragments of narrative. So what I was really excited about was that both George and Paige kind of went in cold and didn't really say, oh, this is where the person is. So I'm not going to do that either. I'm going in cold, I'm going to just start. And that's the spirit what I'm going to. So you ended with the cities collapsing and everything becoming forest. The forest had always been there, waiting for the end of the world. It was patient and vast, and it did not care. 4 people survived the end of the world. One was a wise woman, and one was a smart man, and one was a quick woman, and one was a strong man. The forest was difficult. There were bugs and animals and sickness. They lived in the forest for many years. The smart man grew sick, and the wise woman said, "I believe we can change this. We can change the forest." The strong man said, "Tell me what I can do." And she told him to begin cutting down trees. The smart man said, "Tell me what I can do." And she told him to measure a place, a square, where they could grow crops. The quick woman asked, "What are you doing?" And the wise woman told her to go into the forest and to tell the forest what they were doing. They made a clearing and put vegetables in it. The vegetables got the whole of the sun because the strong man had cleared away the trees. They made a small house and were happy. One day the quick woman returned. She had become a giant, fearsome dragon. She growled, "You left me there. You left me in the forest. It was dark and loud and terrible, and I didn't know who I was. So I became a dragon to be strong." The wise woman said, "You cannot stay with us." The dragon laughed. "Why would I want to stay with you? I hate you. I will burn you." And the dragon flew away. They were alone. The smart man grew well again in the clearing, but the strong man grew sick. The smart man held the strong man and asked, "What is happening? Why are you sick?" "I had a place in the forest, a purpose," the strong man said. "What do I do now that we live here?" The wise woman went into the forest to talk to it. She went to the oldest and largest tree and put her hand to it. "Why are you here? What have you come to ask of me?" asked the forest. "When we live with you, we get sick. When we live away from you, we get sick. You turned my sister into a dragon. What are you doing to us? Why is this happening?" "I don't understand your questions. I am the forest. This is what happens." "What is the purpose of all this? What do you want us to do?" "Want? I don't want. I don't need. I am patient and vast. I am complete. I do not care. Your questions are all about what you want and what your people want." The wise woman struck the tree. "I'm tired of this, of you. I just want a world I can understand. Do you hear me? I want to understand." The forest was silent. The wise woman came back to the clearing. The crops were big and green in the sunlight. She walked into their cabin. The strong man was sicker, and the smart man held him in his arms. "He's worse. What did the forest say?" the smart man asked. "Nothing. The forest has nothing to say." And the wise woman came to the edge of the clearing with an axe and a torch. She burned everything she saw and cut everything that would not catch. She cut and burned until her eyes watered and her arms tired and tears ran down her cheeks. "I hate you. I hate you," she cried. Her cutting and burning brought the dragon. The dragon said, "What are you doing? This is madness." The dragon didn't care for the forest, but she hated the people for all that had happened. She attacked the wise woman, but the wise woman was strong and fought her. The dragon clenched the wise woman in her jaws, and the wise woman set her mouth afire. They flew away, thrashing and burning. The smart man knew they were alone now. He tended to the strong man. He brought him clean water and porridge and cool cloths to soothe the strong man's hot brow. I should be well, the strong man groaned. "Just rest. I'll take care of you," the smart man said. The smart man did everything he knew to do. He made poultices and potions. He made the strong man's bed cool and warm. He fed him broth and water and porridge with herbs. None of it worked, and the strong man grew weaker and weaker. At the end, the strong man leaned his head against the smart man's chest. "Thank you. I'm dying, but these last days have been my happiest. Thank you for taking care of me. I love you." The smart man wailed, "I love you. I can't lose you. Why is this happening?" The strong man kissed his cheek. "This is the forest still. This is what happens." The strong man died that night, and the smart man buried him near the clearing. Each morning, the smart man would visit the strong man's grave. Each day, he would grow crops and clear trees and gather the harvest. Each night, he would dream of killing the forest. Okay, and the next one is from further ahead, at the beginning. He dreamed he was in the forest, the deepest of all, with every tree spidering out of the ground and into the other trees. He could see the pattern of every tree inside the leaves, and he knew that the pattern of the forest was the same as the pattern of the tree. He didn't know the edges of the forest or how to get out. He was inside a thicket, and it felt like shelter. The shadow came over him. He couldn't see the shadow, but he could feel that the shadow was warm and wanted Albert, and Albert wanted him back. And when he buried his face into the shadow, feeling its pulse and skin and warmth, he was the shadow too, and they were the forest too. When his father woke him, he had a moment of not knowing where he was. Arto put out some of last night's biscuits with a strong cheese and some radishes from the garden. He made some eggs and barley tea while Albert loaded up the cart. They ate in quiet until Arto said, "You haven't talked since last night. We didn't mean to embarrass you." "I know. And we won't speak of it. Mama Muro told us that it's difficult." "There's no it. There's nothing to talk about. Everyone's made up a story about nothing. I'm fine. I love food and fighting and shooting arrows. That's all." Arto smiled and patted his hand. "Probably it will die down at the market around lunch and you can go out and hunt a bit." He took a sip of his tea. "I want you to get some things to read from Harriet today. You haven't been bringing books home. You didn't think I would notice, did you? I told Harriet I would trade some vegetables and beer. Get whatever you want." "No, don't do that," Albert said. "It's not worth the cost. I'm almost out of school and I won't need to read after that. You need to read for the rest of your life, all right? You don't know how good it is that you and the children in Edentown get to spend years in school. In the rest of the world, you don't have the adepts healing everyone and teaching them how to live. When you get away from the islands, you're lucky to eat, much less go to school. You aren't going to waste that." "Do they read in wars?" Albert said. "You've been in one, and I haven't, so I don't know. I didn't get the impression that there was a lot of reading, though." Arto looked away from Albert. He gave more attention to his bite of biscuit and cheese than it needed. "You're smart, aren't you? You're smarter than your father." The adepts had taught them in school how to identify emotional states in their bodies. They taught it when the children were very little, using games and play. Albert remembered the lesson about shame, about the tightness of breath in the top of his stomach, just beside the ribs. That was where his shame lived, and it sang to him now. "I'm sorry, Papa. I don't govern myself." "Yes," Arto said, "you are going to war, and I don't sleep anymore, because I know this. But what happens when you get back? This is what I try to think about. I try to think about when you come home. Maybe someday I will think about it enough to sleep. And when I finally sleep, I'll dream that you come home with honor, and that you move into a nice house, maybe a farm, or maybe you will live with Thomas. Or no, because you don't love Thomas, do you? But you'll be home, on the island, in civilization. You taught me that word. Do you remember that? I don't need much from civilization. It's not really my world. Civilization means we have this farm and no one is trying to kill us. That's all I need. But you, civilization is your world. You learned everything from the adepts, and you learned it better than anyone. Better even than Thomas, although only his mother is brave enough to say that out loud. So I'll dream of you coming home a gentleman, with strength and honor and the power of your mind. All the riches you will have," Arto said, with a burst of enthusiasm that took him halfway out of his seat. "I can barely imagine. I told you how it was in Viru. It wasn't like that at all. Everyone was poor always. Hell, one winter it was so bad somebody tried to eat me. That's right, the one time, and the man was crazy, and you had to run away." Albert had heard this story many, many times, and very much wanted to preempt hearing it again. "You'll never understand until you see it," Arto said. "All these things have been part of your life since you were a baby. Book. When I was a boy, I didn't know book. There was no thing. What is book? What is read? I never read anything, and I never will. Your mother sewing with needles now? There's no needle in Viru. There's no market, no farm. When we got here, Malplank and the adepts taught us what farming was and why we should care. Before then, all our lives, it was nothing but hunt and fight and eat and die. You couldn't even understand." He trailed off. There was a long silence. "So," Arto then said, picking up and biting a radish, "you are going to keep reading, no more protest. Once you have a book, you can read it, and you can trade it for more books." That's what Harriet said. "And then, when you become a gentleman, and you live in your big house, probably without Thomas, but maybe with Thomas. When you live there, you can remember that we bought you a book, and you can invite us to live with you in your big house." Albert put his hand on Arto's. "I don't know if it will work out like that, but thank you, Papa." "We should head into town," Arto said. They started down the road from their farm to the market square. The road was relatively smooth and marked with only their wagon wheels. They shared the road with the Planks, who had the farm just once over. Arto always sang a song while they rode. Once, when he was little, Albert had asked Arto about it. "It's a folk song from Viru, wishing good travel. It's lucky," Arto said. "It doesn't sound lucky, it sounds scary," Albert said, and Arto laughed. Now Albert sang along, although he barely understood the song. All the words were familiar, common words they used in the house, but together they became gibberish or a code. He sang along all the louder for that, full of hope that someday the veil would drop, that he would be granted a sudden understanding of something real and deep about his father. Thank you.